Welcome to the Solihull Bid and Solihull Radio video podcast series. Tonight, I'm delighted to announce our VIP guest, a vanguard of business development and our wonderful Mayor of the West Midlands, Mr. Andy Street. COVID has dramatically shifted the context in the way the government and local key partners are operating. As an influential leader, Andy, you must be facing complex challenges, but also some important opportunities. Are there any plans that you can share with us?
Certainly not, Mel. No, they're all top secret. No, of course I can. It's lovely to be here on Solihull Radio to do that. I think the way to think about this is that we've had a huge knock, haven't we? We were doing so well as a region before COVID came, and a town like Solihull was really thriving. Then we've had this horrible knock. So I think there's two things to talk about here, really. Some of the plans have to be about protecting the existing businesses because they're going to be there to lead us forward. And the sector I'm most worried about at the moment, of course, is the hospitality sector. And if you think of Solihull Town Centre, brilliant retail, but all the sort of cafes, restaurants, bars, they're just as much part of it. And bluntly put, we need the government to put more money on the table to support those businesses, whether it be in cash now, whether it be in VAT rates, business rates going forward. So that is a short-term battle I want to win. But then we've got to think longer term as well. What are the new jobs of the future, whether they be in this electrification of the automotive industry? And just give you a lovely example there. We've just had the news that TVS, an Indian company, has actually bought the Norton motorcycle company, bought it out of administration. And where are they setting up their headquarters? In Solihull. So it's a great example of new investment coming in for a traditional industry, but modernising it in that electrification way.
The final transition of Brexit is breathing down on us. How do you think the outcome may affect our towns and cities, Andy?
So I may make myself unpopular now, Mel, but I need to be honest. I've never been a Brexiteer. But I've always respected the fact that was the decision taken by the citizens of the West Midlands. The people in Solihull voted to leave the EU. That's been honoured. But I really, really still hope there will be a deal. And particularly, say, affect our towns. Think of this town, the single biggest employer by a country mile is JLR. They need to be able to export those brilliant products. We don't need a tariff on them. So Brexit has been honoured, but we do need a deal. There are some really positive aspects of Brexit, though. And one of them that I think is really interesting at the moment is about having to train local people. I can understand that people got very frustrated that for years and years, we saw people coming in, free movement within Europe to take jobs. And maybe now, one of the silver linings of this is we will actually be recruiting, training our own people. And a statistic, a number I saw recently said, a much, much higher proportion of new jobs in the West Midlands are now taken by local people. So that's a good impact on our town.
Whilst any positives can no way compensate for the terrible loss of lives and the devastating impact that it's had on our economy, what have you found to be the highlights, though, from the resilient communities out there?
It's a lovely question, actually, because, of course, our first thoughts are about all the tragedies that have occurred with COVID. But there have been some remarkable stories. And I need to look no further than this town to find actually one of the most remarkable. And that's the setting up of all sorts of community groups that didn't exist before, and give them full credit. The Hampers for Heroes that you might have covered started off in a garage not far from the town centre, actually. And it's just a wonderful story of people coming together to meet a practical need. And it's all about getting hampers of sort of great food and also sort of personal care stuff out to people who are working in intensive care wards. And it's just a lovely story of communities coming together. And you know what? There are so many of those across the West Midlands. And one thing we've done in the Combined Authority is put a website together telling the stories of all of those. So if someone, whether they be in Alton or Chelmsley or in Kings Winford or Wolverhampton, want to get involved in a community group, we're trying to signpost people to those. But there's been an incredible community response. And I think the interesting question is, how do we make sure that continues and we don't lose some of those brilliant things? And the other group that have to be called out is all the different faith communities. Because whether it be, frankly, the traditional churches or whether it be the Muslim Centre here or the Gurdwaras across the region, they've all come together to do remarkable things and care, not just for their own faiths, but to anybody who wanted to come in. So it has been the best of human spirit at the worst of times.
Andy, we know that Solihull holds a special place in your heart, as it's somewhere which we know you grew up in. What do you think is one of the things that makes it so unique?
You're right. Whenever I come to Solihull, the memories are there. So we're just opposite what used to be the cinema. For your slightly older listeners, they'll remember the cinema. I've got my stories of my teenage years in the cinema there. They were very fierce, the people who showed you to your seats and kept discipline in there in the 1980s, I tell you, 70s and 80s. But yeah, no, to answer your question, what is so special about Solihull, I think, is it has got a brilliant blend of being the most dynamic place you could possibly imagine, really. If you look at the progress, the success here over recent years, it's been truly outstanding. So it's so dynamic, but it manages somehow to blend that with being very, very loyal to its traditions, to its values. And people here just lead a very, I think it's sort of correct way of life. And that might sound very old-fashioned, but I think there's something that's really very, very special here about that mix of traditional but dynamic. It's a place that embraces change, but my goodness, underneath it all, it's still got the same principles that have seen it really look after generations of young people being brought up really well here. And that's a very special thing to do, not to lose the past, but to embrace the future.
All the TV adverts are now launched, coming up to this wonderful time of the year, up to Christmas. And John Lewis, as I say that to you, as we've always waited with bated breath, haven't we, for the John Lewis advert? And this year, I think that for the first time, they've combined it with Waitrose.
That's right.
But I think the sentiment out there for all of the Christmas TV adverts has really been about love and sharing and kindness. So on that theme, what are you expecting, or what are you hoping, should I say, is going to be underneath your tree this Christmas, Andy?
Lovely. So you're right about the John Lewis ad, by the way. Became quite a phenomenon, didn't it? And it was always slightly nerve-wracking whether we do this great launch and people would say, well, that's a real dud. But thankfully, we got away with it for those years. But this year they've done a lovely ad, actually, haven't they? The sharing and the spirit of giving that they've done beautifully. So that's great. So I suppose what's under the tree this Christmas? The hackneyed answer would, of course, be the COVID vaccination. People would probably say, you're not in the queue yet. You're not in your 80s. But for all of us, just the knowledge that that's coming, that gives a bit of hope at Christmas, doesn't it? And we all need hope after the year that we've had. I suppose what I'd personally like under the tree would be a box set of The Crown. I love the first two series, but I watch them in an obsessive way, one after the other. And I know it's nonsense. I know it doesn't tell the story completely accurately, but it's a brilliant piece of TV, really. So I just hope I'd have the time to sit down, watch it all. But of course, it's not even in a box set, the final episodes yet, so I can't have that. But that might be my special hope that would come under, because that's our history. And as I say, there's been a bit of poetic license. Everyone's admitted that. But it's the history of our country over my adult lifetime. So yeah, I'd love to spend a bit of time at Christmas just doing that. And time is always the best gift at Christmas.
Thank you, Andy. And can we also, on behalf of everybody here at Solihull Radio, Solihull Beard and the people of Solihull, wish you a very, very Merry Christmas.
Well, the last word should be for me to wish every resident of Solihull a very happy Christmas and, of course, a far, far more successful 21 than we've endured in 2020.